America's going through the worst drug crisis in its history, and is tearing families apart. A generation of children is being neglected, abandoned, or orphaned by parents addicted to opioids.
The most powerful force in this world is not a nuclear bomb. It is not the United States military. As a matter of fact, it is not all the militaries of all the world put together. The most powerful force in the human world, in the world of humanity, by the way, has always been the mind.
We got one, huh?
Yeah. There's a call on a possible double overdose.
People here liken the drug crisis to a war, with police and EMTs on the front lines. In the last few years, they've responded to more overdose calls than ever.
It's like a tsunami has hit. But we just keep digging. Maybe the first time was a choice, the second time may have been a choice, but after that, the demon has possession of them.
Scenes like this are happening in homes across the country. And when kids are there, you can only imagine how they process it.
And we're heading, okay, into this very murky future, okay, of the world, okay, with terrorism on the rise. And I don't know how this generation is going to cope with it. I don't think they have the ability to cope with it. And so I think we're heading towards something like late Rome.
It's sad the world the way it is today with the kids.
As Chillicothe and the rest of the nation struggle to contain the opioid epidemic, there's no doubt that the next generation is being shaped by it. The question, which will take years to resolve, is how.
Last year in Ontario alone,
the norm back in the day used to be a mom, a dad, 2 dogs, 2 kids. Now it's maybe a parent, maybe a grandmother, maybe an uncle, maybe a foster home, maybe just a whole lot of
babies. Now the MTA has issued a new mandate. Announcements made by conductors are gender neutral in an effort to include all people.
Hello everyone, there is a Brooklyn-bound A express train approaching 42nd Street.
Yes. So we get these hyper-masculine societies.
Exactly.
And we're, worried about
and we're into like
toxic masculinity
and
the Ivy
League. Let's blend. Let's do like gender bending things. To me, it's like one of my favorite movies, The Time Machine, okay, which is a movie from my high school years of H.G. Wells' novel, a futuristic novel. And you have humanity has split at the end, okay, into the Morlocks, where there's a horrible or industrial, they're kind of subterranean enslavers. And then you have the Eloi. The Eloi are all very gender bending, and they're like the boys are very girlish, and they're all kind of they're eating fruits, and they're lying, and they're enjoying life, and everything's very hedonistic. There's a girl drowning. Look, a girl is drowning. They can't do anything about it. And that's what our universities, our elite schools are turning out. The Eloi.
Oh, you're right. Yes. Well, there we are.
So your view is this is political correctness run amok?
Yeah, I mean, it's the furthest extension of political correctness. That when you say something, that it's not just me disagreeing with you, it is me destroying your identity as a human being in a way that is akin to violence.
So all of this maneuvering and in diversity training and sexual harassment sensitivity training, all that stuff, this has to stop. Okay, this is real. This is sick. It's Kafkaesque. It's like out of a nightmare, Twilight Zone world. How have we tolerated this?
They said Ben Shapiro has openly called transgender people mentally ill. He portrays the great gay rights movement as a conspiracy to root out God-based institutions. He has recently defended conversion therapy, which is nothing short of abuse.
Okay, so there are a bunch of things that are just not true there. I am unaware of any time that I have ever defended conversion therapy as such, said that it's effective, because I don't see the evidence that it's effective.
What about this idea that you call transgender people mentally ill?
I do say that transgenderism is a mental illness, because it's gender dysphoria. It's a psychological disorder. So that's not an insult to people who suffer from psychological disorders. You are not doing a service to people who are suffering from a mental disorder to humor them by suggesting that their mental disorder is reflected in objective reality.
You're seeing this. We all see this, don't we? We see these things happening all across the United States, all across Canada, all across the West. We see these things happening. We're no longer discussing things civilly. We're just coming to basically fight each other as gladiatorial battles happen. It's led to a loss of civility, but it's also led to a loss of reason, because then we have the polar opposite thing happen, the opposite phenomenon, where we're not always saying they are them and we are us and they're always evil. Some of us want to make sure that everyone agrees and we all get along to the point where we ignore our differences and don't give each other the dignity of difference.
Where did this come about? I mean, how did this come about? And even at University of Santa Cruz, very enterprising professor of psychology has come up with a microaggression app, a mobile app. And so you can immediately report if you overhear someone making an off-color joke or something. And they're policing one another. It's an anonymous surveillance system that would have made the Stasi envious. And so you can now be reported. It's overheard.
But go on. He said, look, here's my view. There is an objective truth out there. Truth actually exists in an objective sense. But we don't have all of it. None of us has all of it. And I said, so far you and I agree. He said, but here's the thing. All of us have versions of the truth, as incomplete as they may be. All of us have versions of the truth. So I challenged it a little bit. I said, all of us? Really? All of us? Pol Pot? Mao Zedong? Adolf Hitler? Joseph Stalin? Mussolini? Pick your despot. They had versions of the truth? This is what he said to me, and I'm telling you this exactly what he told me. He said, I cannot say that I prefer their version of the truth, but I also cannot say that I disagree with it, because mine is also incomplete. And I said, buddy, it's safe to say that you disagree with Hitler. No one's going to get mad at you for that. He said, I can't disagree with him. I said, so let me understand this straight. Are you telling me that you can't disagree with anybody? He said, that's right. I said, sure you can. He said, no, I can't. I said, you just did it. That's 15 years of lawyer training. My point, an otherwise very well-intentioned and very intelligent man, maybe even far more brilliant than I am, had his preferences that everyone just be considered equally valid in terms of their views, or equally invalid, however you look at it, and all of it smooth over, and he was sacrificing his reason on the altar of his preferences. And that is the very definition of what happens to us in a post-truth culture.
It's actually a natural phenomenon, and they're committing suicide because they're depressed, because people are mistreating them.
Then I'm not for mistreatment, but I don't think that me suggesting that you're not a woman is mistreatment of you.
And we want freedom, okay? The college said the world is a dangerous place, okay? You could be attacked, you could be raped, okay? We said, okay, give us the freedom to risk rape. Freedom is much more important, okay, than protection and safety, okay? And that's what young people have given up today. They want reassurance, they want the parental eye on them, okay? And they've given up freedom. And with personal freedom goes freedom of thought, okay? And that's why we're not going to get anything interesting, okay, in intellect or the arts, okay, from a generation that has been coddled and infantilized the way this generation has been. Okay.
Well,
we have become so sensitive. We have become so politically correct that we've lost a good chunk of our freedom. And it's like throwing that big old bullfrog into a pot of cold water on the stove, and you slowly turn up that heat. Before the bullfrog understands what's happening, it's too late. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid that's exactly where we are as a country right now.
What has happened is these young people now getting to college have no sense of history of any kind. no sense of history, no world geography, okay, no sense, okay, of the violence and the barbarities of history, okay. So they think that the whole world has always been like this, a kind of nice, comfortable world where you can go to the store and get orange juice and milk, and you can turn on the water and the hot water comes out, right? They have no sense whatever, okay, of destruction, okay, of the great civilizations that rose and fell and so on, and how, you know, and how arrogant people get when they're in a comfortable civilization, etc. Okay, right? So they now are being taught to look around them to see defects in America, which is the freest country in the history of the world, okay, and so on, and to feel, okay, that somehow America is the source of all evil in the universe. Okay? It's because they've never been exposed to the actual evil of the history of humanity.
I think our culture today, with all the shifts that are happening, we no longer have fixed points of reference. We're awash in the river. And we seem to like the vertigo. We seem to like all the changes and the no standards, and we can do and be and say whatever we want and all these kind of things.
Some strap hangers are fed up with the concern over political correctness.
I think that's silly, and I don't think it really offends anyone to say ladies and gentlemen.
I think it's innovative. It's great. I mean, at today's day and age, I mean, you are who you are.
Without the fixed points of reference, however, I think we've immersed ourselves fully into this post-truth culture. But also we can be comfortable in saying, no one disagrees. Can we all just get along? We're looking for comfort, not truth.
His wife Amy printed and posted the signs after learning about the suicide rates in their town.
It's the helplessness.
I know a lot of people who are like, I've gone to school with and stuff who have been depressed, who have attempted suicide or have committed suicide. And I mean, it really is a problem, especially with our generation.
How many deaths is it going to take? How many? How much is it going to take to make you realize that here at my school is an epidemic of depression and suicide?
There have been 9 suicides across the East Valley in just the last 13 weeks.
There's a much different mood inside Perry High School now than ever before. Just this school year, the Massillon School lost 3 students to suicide, most recently this week.
In response to the first suicide, now
for our kids, this is a tough time. We've talked a lot about this. It's a tough time to be a kid.
It really troubles me.
And Skyland Trails Chief Medical Officer, psychiatrist Dr. Raymond Kotwicki believes there are 2 key factors playing into why we're seeing this jump in suicides in America.
Heroin is stronger than any human tie. It is stronger than any compelling argument. It is stronger than a religious belief. It is the devil incarnate. It is evil. It's the Black Plague. It's like the zombie apocalypse. It's death.
It's kind of like you're possessed or something. Like you don't even care anymore. You don't know reality. Your reality is gone. Eventually this cycle kills you if you don't get out.
There is a hole in their life. Why did they abandon me? Why didn't they love me enough to take care of me? Why didn't they love me enough to stop doing what they were doing? Why wasn't I worth it?
Finally, Dr. Kotwicki says substance abuse also plays a major role in suicides.
The sense of feeling like you actually matter or that you actually belong to a community looks like it really is plummeting.
In your mind, you make decisions every day. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm not going to do. This is where I'm going to go. This is where I'm not going to go. Your mind is the control center of who you are. And if you don't know this already, you better learn it. Our belief determines our behavior. Our belief determines our behavior. Let me tell you something. I don't have to ask any of you in this room what you believe about anything. I really don't. Show me how you live, and I'll show you what you believe. The rest is just talk. You cannot afford to lose this battle, because the only way to stay in control of you is to stay in control of your mind, because your mind controls you. Former President Woodrow Wilson put it this way: He said, he that will not command his thoughts will soon lose command of his actions.
And now it has devolved into this sort of this very, very controlled and I don't want to say Stalinist, but yes, Stalinist.
It is very codified. Like I just last week saw with the Penn State codification, okay, of surveillance and how to report. And every category of possible offense is listed with the numbers to call. If, and they're encouraging people to report on fellow students, report on faculty, report on staff. This is madness. This has nothing whatever to do with intellectual development.
Now, this battle that Paul is talking about is all about knowledge and all about thoughts and all about arguments. Where do those come from? They come from our mind.
Has your ability to see whatever you want on the screens, to be with whoever you want and whatever way you want, if that sets you free, or have these screens perhaps, but one example, enslaved you to a mechanistic view of the way humans actually are? Have you now reduced us, and even yourself, to the sum of your parts? That doesn't seem freedom giving. It seems to me to bind you to the physical forces around you.
Paul is saying, your mind's like a castle. It's like a stronghold. Your mind is like a fort, and it's constantly under attack. And your mind is the bullseye in this battle. And you say, wait a minute, why is the mind the bullseye? Why is the mind such a big deal? Why is it that Satan, more than anything else, would love to control my mind? It's real simple. Whatever controls your mind controls you.
More than the digital distractions, because our digital distractions have narrowed our worldview down from the natural and the supernatural down to just the natural, and now just to 4.3 inches. That's enslavement of the heart. It has not given you that freedom. See, the freedom is all about being free, not only from restrictions, but from the restrictions that keep you from being what you were meant to be. And that's where true fulfillment comes in.
I think it's utterly perplexing, particularly given where Christianity has taken us, not only Australia, but Western countries, I think, generally. The sort of ideas that have come out of Christianity, the abolition of slavery, for instance, has its genesis in Christian theological teaching.
I agree.
So I find it fascinating, but it's so sad. I mean, at the end of the day, this college decided that they would allow for a multi-faith stall,
provided it wasn't manned.
Yeah, and I mean, this sort of idea that you have a multi-faith stall, and that if you don't have something like that, you're
I don't get it.
You're being too offensive to people who might be of a different religion.
Before you begin to think, so it's just a mental battle, right? It's just a psychological battle. Well, no, because listen to what he says in verse 3. He says, for though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. In other words, Paul says, look, understand something here. You're not primarily in a physical battle, or as much as it is a spiritual battle. It's not just a moral battle, it's also a mental battle. And unlike the world's wars, this war, he says, it's invisible. It's not a military war, it's a mental war. You're in a war in your mind, you're in a war of the mind, you're in a war for the mind.
The allegations of abuse made by women against him have exploded beyond Hollywood, creating a cultural tipping point. They've forced a deep examination of who we are to one another, whatever industry we work in and wherever we live. Unlike the other stories Hollywood tells itself and us, this is no fairy tale. It ends with guilt and shame, the luster gone out of this city of lights. The day we meet Kim Masters, Hollywood Reporter's editor-at-large, she's on the crest of another story of alleged sexual misconduct. Disney has just suspended the head of Pixar Animation. The veteran journalist says Weinstein had been on her radar for years, but his power and legal reach kept the story hidden. Amid these glittering lights, there's an overwhelming sense of opportunity lost.
You were really doing everything you could. Well, that professionalism, I've kind of learned, can hurt you at times, because sometimes it's important to listen to that voice inside even if it means that you're going to be fired, even if it means that an opportunity will go down the drain.
Alexis told us Weinstein kissed her forcefully on the mouth and put his hand up her shirt.
But the thing that people need to understand is when you speak your mind and you're truly speaking from the heart and how you feel about things, speaking it is the easy part. Dealing with backlash is the hardest. So remember that. So if you're going through a hard time out there and you're feeling like maybe you don't know whether you want to speak up on an issue or stand up for what you believe in or this, that, and the other, I'm telling you right now, it's not easy. I've been around the world, been featured on a lot of news articles, a lot of television stations for the things that I've said. But it's worth it, because no matter how much hatred I get, no matter how many people come against me, I've always held true to my beliefs and I won't compromise them. And that's brace for impact. Brace for the disagreement. Brace for the hatred that's going to come back against you, because it will come. Brace yourself for that, because so many people will come to me saying, I need this, and I'll help them, and all of a sudden they'll start getting criticized online for even doing business with me, for even knowing me or taking a picture with me. And before I know it, I lose a friend because of my views and how I feel. And we don't even know where to go to anymore to get our news, and everything is just so confused.
Rock star Pink was never going to be a typical mum, but now she's opened up about raising her kids as gender neutral. She's told a magazine that she doesn't want to impose traditional gender roles on six-year-old Willow, her daughter, and 11-month-old son Jameson. Plus, she was happy to see a gender neutral bathroom at a primary school recently. So should we be raising our children this way?
So some controversy today from Pope Francis that has people sort of turning their heads a little bit on this one. The leader of the Catholic Church suggesting that the Lord's Prayer, the best known prayer in Christianity, which is prayed by not thousands, as I said earlier, but 2.2 billion people around the world, may undergo a little bit of an edit. He says the phrase, lead us not into temptation, suggests that God induces temptation in his followers, and do not let us fall into temptation would be more acceptable.
It's heartbreaking because you truly feel alone and isolated sometimes. I know a lot of people out there, regardless of your political belief or your religion, you feel somewhat the same way, like you're on this road by yourself, you know? And you got no support.
You know, it's funny, on Pinterest, everybody's figured out how bad they planned their wedding. You know how bad your wedding looked? Just go on Pinterest. And you know how much money you spent and you didn't even have candles inside of mason jars? Are you kidding me? On YouTube, you realize how unexciting your life is. You're telling me you're not jumping off cliffs with a GoPro attached to you? You're not flying on Qatar Airlines with a $20,000 ticket? Are you kidding me? You know, on Facebook, you realize how you don't have any friends. And on Instagram, everybody looks better than you, don't they? What are you telling me? You're not a brand? You're not monetizing your Instagram account? You don't have makeup tutorials on there yet? What's wrong with you? You don't have a click with the hashtag? Are you even alive? Some of the older people are saying, what the heck is he talking about? Stay that way. It's freedom. It's freedom. Social media creates in you the pressure to perform instead of the release to live. He wants you to live freely and lightly, like one verse says. Bible says that my yoke will be a perfect fit. In other words, I've formed a life, a calling, a purpose that's specific to you, and it's a perfect fit. That's why you can't look at someone else, because if you try and take their yoke, it will be ill-fitting and it will be too heavy for you.
It's pretty powerful, and then an even louder one to the northeast. And I have no idea what it is. I have no air parts around. I have, it's coming from the sky, and it's very pronounced and powerful. You can just sense how powerful it is, but yet so far away. And I hope that picked it up. I finally got it on video. I've been trying forever here, past 2 weekends, and yeah. But that was it. I'm hearing about 10 to 15 minutes apart, and they're very powerful and unexplainable.
Asking what was that loud boom in Alabama.
Didn't take long for me to jump out my chair, cause I knew this whole world was doomed.
Then a little bit of a delay, and then a third boom.
Then information we've been able to gather.
The percussion inside, I could feel it in my trailer. It rattled my trailer.
Wall shook, the door shook, the window shook.
That's still the case for that boom, heard on November 14th by residents all over central Alabama.
It shook our house.
It's the sound.
Everybody's just wondering what it is.
I'm sitting in my living.
I was just sitting in my recliner.
I heard two booms.
Bam, boom.
We're all asking about.
Well, for the third time in nearly 3 weeks, people across Alabama are baffled after hearing something like this.
Yeah, what was it? Some of you heard at least 2 more booms like that.
Just like folks in Walker, Winston, Coleman, Blunt, St. Clair, Talladega.
Hey, what happened? I don't know. That was awesome.
Yet questions remain.
Even the man in the white button down and suspenders, he didn't have a clue.
With interest all over Facebook about the Bama boom.
I heard sonic booms before, and you're not gonna get 3 booms.
For the last several years, and some say longer, the Magic Valley has been under some sort of siege.
I would describe it as something similar to a sonic boom.
There's an audible boom, and then it shakes. It's like this weird
vibration.
Yeah, the vibration.
From Buell to Burley, these booms have been best described as a bunch of audible
It just sounds like boom, and then like.
and feelable.
It's more like this is the best sound I can give you, which is my hands moving. That's kind of what it seems like. It just
sensations. Chelsea Skroback has only lived in Twin Falls for 2 years.
I just thought it was Twin Falls, right? It just boomed. That was how it was.
During her short time here, Chelsea says she's heard and felt the phenomenon about 30 times, always coming in a rash of resonance.
It got really frequent for about 2 to 3 weeks, and then it's just died off again. I haven't heard it in a while.
Chelsea noticed the last one happening on November 13th.
It's just a vibration and a boom.
She's also noticed she's not the only one noticing.
And it's been popping up on my Facebook, like, what was that sound? And I'm like, you guys are behind. I've been hearing this for almost 2 years now.
95.7 KEZJ.
For them to hear a sonic boom, our aircraft would practically have to fly over the top of Twin Falls.
Besides, Byron says, the reports appeared to be far too random to be attributed to military aircraft.
If we were operating normally on a day-to-day basis out there, and we are, and we're going supersonic on a day-to-day basis, and we are, then you would think that the correlation between the booms that they're hearing and what we're doing would be more regular, and it is not. That does not seem to be the case.
Leaving the real reason still up in the air.
It is a mystery just northeast of Denver that captured the world's imagination. A loud boom rocked the town of Log Buoy and several other areas. We aren't the only ones wondering what's going on. This is one of dozens of booms that have been reported around the world in recent weeks.
It stood out and definitely made me wonder what it was.
Those living in the Silver Peaks neighborhood report hearing that loud boom at around 9 o'clock on Monday night.
It wasn't just a small vibration, it shook the whole neighborhood.
And I got up and I was like, oh my God.
It's a big mystery, yeah.
It was very loud. I was just got out of the shower and I was sitting on my bed. All of a sudden I heard a boom, boom. It shook the whole building. And then my roommate, he came on, he goes, what the heck was that? I go, I don't know. So we looked outside. Maybe it could have been a car accident or something, but nothing.
It's kind of scary, kind of concerning that they can't figure it out, because that was a pretty loud bang, being that it shook the whole town almost.
Police department there saying they heard and felt that explosion inside of their police department, but again, they do not know the cause.
A mystery. We also talked to Brighton police. They're just as much in the dark as the rest of us.
lot of people have called us asking about booms they've been hearing around southern Arizona.
But what was behind the mysterious booms? Hundreds of you have been telling us about them across southern Arizona over the last few days.
I'm here at an east side neighborhood near Golf Links and Prudence. Now, locals who live right here and all over the city and county not only felt this boom, but heard it as well. Eddie Borquez and Michael De Silva have lived in this east side neighborhood for years, but have never experienced anything like it before.
Oh, God, she got right up next to me and just started quivering. You know, a dog can usually sense things.
The first mysterious boom happened Tuesday, 8:11 at night.
And it was really, really loud.
Then again, yesterday afternoon at 3:06.
I was actually thinking that was an earthquake.
Just felt like a big, almost like something hit our house, like something ran into it.
Base officials, they can't say if their planes actually created a sonic boom or not.
It's a mystery.
It's 6 o'clock and here's what's happening. A mysterious boom shakes homes and rattles nerves. Residents around the region still trying to get to the bottom of the bang.
People throughout South Jersey said they felt something, but it was very intense right here in North Wildwood.
In between the cheers, all the chatter at this cross-country meet in North Wildwood Wednesday was about a behemoth boom.
So I heard this great big boom.
Everyone had a theory about the mysterious sound that made homes and offices shake.
I thought something fell on top of the roof.
Somebody hit the back of the building.
Yeah.
Remember? Like somebody crashed.
Thought that a crane or something like that had just dropped something onto the beach.
In other words, it was probably a high-speed jet.
They say it was not one of their jets that caused the boom. I've also called about a half dozen other military jet operations in the region. No word on what jet caused that boom.
That's the boom that rocked the region and still has people talking.
It was a big boom.
Mysterious booms have happened along the coast for decades, but some say this one was a little different.
Just more intense. It was a lot louder, and I've been on the beach, and you hear it, and your first thought's always, well, they're doing something at one of the military bases or whatever, but this literally shook everything.
Something out there caused the grounds to shake.
Folks all across San Diego reported feeling rattling and a boom. People throughout San Diego County say they heard it. They felt it. But what was it?
Well, we've been looking into this mystery to get some answers.
So this, as I mentioned, was not isolated to the folks here in Coronado where the Navy is present. Now, the Navy did tell us it did not come from the Naval Outlying.
Response 8 Gentry Way.
Channel 8 Newsroom.
Call after call, Facebook.
I heard a loud boom, and I felt it also, and it rattled the house, so it, rattled some things in the house, so I just figured it was an earthquake.
There was no earthquake in the area, according to USGS.
Well, were your windows rattling or dogs barking as you sat down to eat breakfast this morning? If so, you were not alone. Many of you reached out to us by phone and online to report hearing loud, house-shaking booms this morning.
Another one says it was so loud that I walked outside to make sure that everything looked okay.
A big boom caused concern and confusion last night.
I spoke with people who not only heard this, but felt it.
Oh, to the core, as they described, also describing this as very intense.
Besides a gust of wind or a barking dog, Northwest 31st Street in Cape Coral stays relatively quiet. That's why the commotion Sunday night is causing a stir.
And all of a sudden there was this huge boom.
A few houses down, the same story.
And just this intense boom. It shook our house. My husband ran inside to check on us. My son's sippy cup actually was knocked from the kitchen table.
Stephanie Burkow was getting her kids ready for dinner. She not only heard the boom, but felt it.
You could feel it in your body. It wasn't just external things. You felt it to the core.
But what it was remains the question.
Twitter was buzzing about loud booms once again on Friday, this time in Florida. The latest in a slew of reports about mysterious booms from around the world. You can see there at the bottom of that tweet, Michelle said, scared the daylights out of us. Back on November 20th, loud booms heard in Colorado were later blamed on an oil storage tank that blew its lid around the same time the noises were reported. This time, a media outlet in Orlando, WESH-TV, reported the sonic booms were believed to have been caused by the military flying F-15s.
So, is it the Air Force? And what are they doing?
Is that something that commonly occurs? I mean, do you get a lot of phone calls?
No, not typically. Byron Schmidt is the airspace manager for Mountain Home Air Force Base. He and science says their airspace is too far from Twin Falls to really have any effect.
For them to hear a sonic boom, our aircraft would practically have to fly over the top of Twin Falls.
Besides, Byron says, the reports appeared to be far too random to be attributed to military aircraft.
Southern Idaho's New Country, 95.7 KZJ, Sugarland, Baby Girl.
Brad Weiser has been in Twin Falls radio since 1987, but he first started hearing these booms about 10 years ago.
It's usually felt as well. It's felt just as much as it's heard.
Brad says he recently realized how far-reaching these feelings went after the event on November 13th.
We asked our audience, and the phones went crazy and said, yeah, we've heard this. Southern Idaho's New Country, 95.7 KZJ, John Park.
Brad says he's also heard rampant reasons for them. And while everything from construction to weather to earthquakes have been debunked, that doesn't stop the speculations.
The mystery remains.
And click a thingy and go.
But everything I'm doing, everything that's happening right now around this is about the same thing. It's all about identity. It's because that's all there is. I think it's the most important thing in the world.
Brown is best known for The Da Vinci Code, one of the best-selling novels of all time. His books have sold more than 200 million copies around the world.
His latest, called Origin, features the return of symbologist Robert Langdon. This time, he's trying to unlock a discovery that will help answer two fundamental questions of human existence. Where do we come from, and where are we going?
As an actor, you play characters, and then if you go deep enough into those characters, you realize that your own character is pretty thin to begin with. And then you suddenly have this separation and go, well, who's Jim Carrey? Oh, he doesn't exist, actually.
When you talk about artificial intelligence, because the character Winston was so good, Dan, I had to keep flipping back to make sure, are we sure this guy's not a human? Right. He was so real in the way that he thought and the way that he behaved. What is the message you're trying to send to us there? Because after a while, it scared me a little bit that the guy was so clear to me that I thought I knew him.
I do believe in manifestation, power of that kind of stuff, but I don't believe that any of it matters. This mattering is to me a human construct, born out of a need, the same need as you have to have, deities and things like that. I mean, I believe in an energy of God, an energy of, everything is divine. There's no thing that isn't divine. Everything is divine, and I'm that. I'm not the body. I'm you guys, and I'm this thing, and I'm this thing, and I'm the cameras, and it doesn't matter to me what's happening on them.
This is great. Origin, the fifth novel, right, in this
it is.
Robert Langdon series, and it focuses on this question we talked about, but how God will survive science.
Is our culture the best role model for a new consciousness, a new intellect? If it learns to be like we are, it's going to learn a lot of compassion, but it could also learn a lot of self-centered evil.
Life isn't happening to you; it's happening for for the good of everyone. It's just it's a play. It's a giant field of consciousness dancing for itself, and you're here to make me happy, and it's making itself happy. It's like one soul. That's how I feel. I feel like people say, well, I have a soul. You don't have a soul. There's no you, but I feel like there is a soul, and it includes everything.
Maybe an existential out-of-body experience, perhaps, for Jim Carrey, or something else interfering with his mind.
I believe we're a field of energy dancing for itself. and I don't care.
But Jim, you got really dressed up for the occasion. You look good.
No,
Was that an accident?
I didn't get dressed up.
Who did?
There is no me.
There's no you.
No.
We're not here. This is a dream?
It's just things happening.
I'm finding that ultimately the freedom from it is something people are kind of hungry for in a way. Right. They're like, I don't want to be me either.
Right.
You know, and I go, well, great, because you never have been.
Right. Has this always been the case? Like, deep down, is that been something that you've always thought of, or is that a shift?
The knowledge has been evolving, you know, and I had to, I believe that I had to become a famous, you know, idea.
Yeah.
And get all the stuff that people dream about, and accomplish a bunch of things that you know that look like success in order to give up my attachment to those things. It's been a part of the evolution of ego is to spend your first half of your life acquiring and adding, thinking you can add to yourself, and it looks great. I mean, it looks great when you got a cool car and you got good, nice clothes, and you know, and you've done something that people admire, you know. But it can never fulfill you. You can never be happy. You know what I mean? It's not where happiness comes from.
There aren't too many people who this guy can't make laugh. He's starred in over 40 films, and we all have our favorite. Yes, from The Mask to The Cable Guy.
Hello, Mama.
Liar, Liar, Batman Forever. Joygasm! Bruce Almighty, Yes Man, Dumb and Dumber.
Want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?
The Truman Show, Me, Myself, and Irene, then the more serious Number 23. And of course the one that pretty much started it all, Ace Ventura, Pet Detective.
Did you have any trouble getting in?
No, the guy with the rubber glove was.
You know, you're talking about like Jim Carrey the man, Jim Carrey the performer. Are you more comfortable as one or the other, or is that like, are they even mutually exclusive?
I don't exist, so they're all characters that I've played, including Jim Carrey, including Joel Barish, including any of those things. They're all characters.
It told us the story of a man who stepped through his life from a child to becoming a hugely successful comedian, also with appearances on Saturday Night Live and David Letterman.
I was just playing bad guy wrestler, you know, and it's just a role. It's not me.
Jim Carrey was a less intentional character,
right?
Because I thought I was just building something that people would like, but it was a character, you know. So it's, you know, I played the guy that was free from concern, so that people who watched me would be free from concern, you know. And then at a certain point, you go like, okay, well, that's great.
And I thought I had become Andy Kaufman, but there was no me actually at the end of it all. I realized that there was, you know, that this character was making choices to play a character, and you know, so that's what kind of happened, and that's what Chris found in this interview and in this footage, that there was actually a existential, not a crisis, but a discovery going on. You know,
there's been a lot of talk in the last few days, well, today recently, about
a lot of people making sound over here.
So much of that.
That's right.
People talking about an interview that you did at New York Fashion Week, and you talked about
I've
identity.
covered a lot of fashion weeks. This is the first time I've run into Jim Carrey. Wait, tell me, is it true you're wandering the streets? You need a date to the party? What's up?
No. I'm doing just fine. I just, you know, there's no meaning to any of this. So I wanted to find the most meaningless thing that I could come to and join, and here I am.
They're celebrating.
I mean, you got to admit it's completely meaningless.
Well, they say they're celebrating icons inside.
Celebrating icons, boy, that is just the absolute lowest aiming, you know, possibility that we could come up with.
It's every actor's job to be brave, to take chances and risk
this, whatever this is.
Carey scored a Golden Globe Award for his performance
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
and is thrilled to be revisiting the role.
God, man, woman, dog.
Let's go to entertainment now. Comedian Jim Carrey has been forced to explain a bizarre interview he gave at New York Fashion Week just days ago.
Do you believe in icons? I don't believe in personalities. I don't believe that you exist, but there is a wonderful fragrance in the air.
You don't believe certain icons have the power to make change, to think differently, to be bold, to inspire others? Artistry? You're one of them.
On the good foot. Ha! Yeah. You shut her down now. Yeah, no, I don't believe in icons. I don't believe in personalities. I believe that peace lies beyond personality, beyond invention and disguise, beyond the red S that you wear on your chest that makes bullets bounce off. I believe that it's deeper than that.
Do you think that people kind of just don't understand it, or they haven't clued in to this whole thing you're talking about of people wearing masks?
I think that we're all, we're all trying to add things to ourselves so that we can finally define ourselves, and then everybody will get us and they'll go, okay, this is what you are. And then if you actually get there, you will find it so empty that you'll realize that's really not what it's about. It's about not only just going with the flow, but it's about not taking it personal. It's like the difference between a house and my house is a world of difference, and it's the my that's the problem. So you can do all this without the my involved.
There's just a relative manifestation of consciousness appearing, and then somebody gave him a bunch of ideas. They gave him a name and a religion and a nationality, and he clustered those together into something that's supposed to be a personality.
The happy place is realizing that you're everything, and that there's no real you involved in the first place. It's a weird little semantic jump that you make where it sounds like, well, that's totally threatening, man. I can't not be me. I've built this construct.
Yeah.
From the time I was given a name, and it's just ideas. Right. They're just ideas. Mm-hmm. The only thing that separates you from an African American or an African Canadian mm-hmm. is an idea. Mm-hmm. And the weather. Right. And the adaptation to the climate. And whatever it is, I don't believe in any of it.
This is a kind of a recurring theme in all of these books of science and religion, God and technology, and it's a kind of a personal journey to try to reconcile the two against each other.
And one of the things too you talk about is artificial intelligence and where that takes us.
Yeah.
You delve in. It's not only just a great thriller. You really kind of challenge the mind.
The story begins with a brilliant futurist who has made a discovery that he believes will undermine the foundations of world religion.
I had to learn a lot about AI to write this book, and these are exciting times. The world is changing very, very quickly, and there's a lot happening that's going to pose some big ethical dilemmas that we're going to have to deal with. Yeah. AI is something that fascinates me deeply, mainly because scientists they can't agree on whether it's going to save us or kill us. A lot of scientists feel that we're on the verge of a new renaissance, that AI will solve the big problems of humanity: scarcity, overpopulation, pollution, and yet a lot of scientists feel that it's so powerful it will destroy us. And as evidence, they remind us that our species has never created a technology that we have not weaponized, and it would be naive to think that AI will be any different.
But Dan, you also said something interesting to me, that with religion, we're always looking up. And in this era of the smartphone, we're always looking down.
We are. And that was a fascinating thing, to talk to both scientists and theologians while researching this book, and understanding that technology is changing the way we interact as humans. And when I grew up, my miracles were the virgin birth, the resurrection. And nowadays, you talk to most kids about the resurrection, and it doesn't really register.
Yeah.
Their miracles are whatever Snapchat can do this week or whatever the new iOS can do. And it's funny, we were talking earlier about this idea that technology has given everybody with an iPhone an international publishing deal instantly.
Instantly.
A platform,
Instantly.
right.
A platform. And it used to be that there was a vetting process to information that rose to the surface. You're in the news, you understand that.
There's no filter.
You're right.
I mean, throughout time, like Andy, like Lenny Bruce, like breakthrough people, artists and whatever, refused to wear the mask. Although Andy was putting masks on, those who wish to masquerade for the rest of this virtual game sometimes are made really uncomfortable by it. And that's kind of the experience I had trying to get back to myself. And then when I finally did get back to who Jim Carrey was, I was like, well, this is optional. And, I'm not really going to stick in here too long. I'm going to play with it. This is a great avatar. I enjoy it. Couldn't beat it, really. I've done pretty good, so I get to, I get all the best weapons and stuff. And no, I'm just enjoying the ride. Everything I'm doing, everything that's happening right now around this is about the same thing. It's all about identity.
I would like to take this entire audience out for milk and cookies. Follow me!
And when you wake up in the morning and you feel like I'm the universe, you don't have to reach for the stars. You can just let life happen.
Yeah.
And walk through the doors.
We'll have to wrap that. Sorry. Thanks very much.
I'm sorry,
Hey.
you've run out of time.
Well, listen, you've made me very happy, so thank you for your time today, man.
No, actually, I didn't make you happy.
Right. I don't know who you've made happy, but
no,
there's a happy feeling
You're just
here.
a cluster of tetrahedrons.
Still trying to figure this
But a
all
pleasant
out, man.
So my entire goal now is to be in a position to aggregate enough of the capital of the world to then reallocate it against my worldview. And I'm not saying my worldview is the best or right, but it is mine. And at the end of the day, there are 150 other guys with their worldview, and they don't give a what you think about their worldview. That's the truth.
I think everybody in this room knows this. You know that if you hold a worldview dearly, there's a certain level of clinging to that worldview because a worldview actually comes into play into your identity. And so if you change that worldview, you change something about who you are. So your questions are always tied to the person.
Chamath Palihapitiya, a former Facebook executive in charge of user growth, now says he has tremendous guilt about the social network he helped build.
The short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops that we have created are destroying how society works. No civil discourse, no cooperation, misinformation, mistruth. Today we live in a world now where it is easy to confuse truth and popularity. And you can use money to amplify whatever you believe and get people to believe that what is popular is now truthful and what is not popular may not be truthful.
But it's true. The calendar does not lie. And we are reminded again and again of, as each passing year comes and goes, that the world is changing at a staggering pace. I have no idea what kind of world will be yours 10 to 15 years from now. What a glorious thing it would be to have unarmed truth and unconditional love, because truth is the most powerful weapon in the world.
It's a really, really bad state of affairs. And we compound the problem, right? We curate our lives around this perceived sense of perfection because we get rewarded in these short-term signals, hearts, likes, thumbs up, and we conflate that with value and we conflate it with truth. And instead what it really is fake brittle popularity that's short-term and that leaves you even more, and admit it, vacant and empty before you did it.
Ego is to spend your first half of your life acquiring and adding, thinking you can add to yourself.
To becoming a hugely successful comedian.
If you actually get there, you will find it so empty that you'll realize that's really not what it's about.
And it looks great. I mean, it looks great when you got a cool car and you got good, nice clothes, and you know, and you've done something that people admire, you know. But it can never fulfill you. You can never be happy.
Because then it forces you into this vicious cycle where you're like, what's the next thing I need to do now? Because I need it back. Think about that compounded by 2 billion people. And then think about how people react then to the perceptions of others. It's really bad. It's really, really bad. But I think the way we defined it was not like this. It literally is a point now where I think we have created tools that are ripping apart the social fabric of how society works. That is truly where we are. And I would encourage all of you, as the future leaders of the world, to really internalize how important this is. If you feed the beast, that beast will destroy you.
It's a tool, so we should use it. God has blessed us with free will. Now it's free will magnified, free will on steroids. You're free to go in any direction you want. It will allow you, and it's not the enemy. It's just a reflection of our own free will. You know, and we all want to be liked. But now we want to be liked by 16 million. And will now some of us do anything to be liked?
I can't control that. I can control my decisions, which is I don't use this. I can control my kids' decisions, which is they're not allowed to use this. And then I can go focus on diabetes and education and climate change. And that's what I can do. But everybody else has to soul search a little bit more about what you're willing to do, because your behaviors, you don't realize it, but you are being programmed. It was unintentional, but now you got to decide how much you're willing to give up, how much of your intellectual independence. And don't think, oh yeah, not me, I'm a genius, I'm at Stanford. You're probably the most likely to fall for it.
See, the loneliest moment is when you have just experienced that which promised you the ultimate and it has let you down. The loneliest moment is when you've just experienced that which has promised you the ultimate and it has let you down. I look at you tonight as young students and I say, and you're really the primary reason I'm here, by the way, because I care for the student world. I care for the young life that is living today, almost skidding out of control with no answers.
Adam Bain, who you know and love, he and I go to the Knick game. And you would think that it's amazing. We're sitting courtside, it's fantastic. I took a picture, he took a picture. We sweated the filter for 15 minutes trying to figure out which photo. And I thought, if Adam Bain and I are stuck trying to figure out what photo filter we're going to use because we're so craving the reaction, what must everybody else be going through? And aren't other people feeling this void that I'm feeling in this moment? I'm not going to backtrack on what I said, because at some core basic level, we have to start talking about this stuff. How should our kids, why is anxiety and depression amongst our teenagers higher than they've ever been?
Yes, it's a
in a
huge,
world
huge
that is
issue.
safer, in a world that's more constructive, in a world where you should have access to everything, what is going on?
I don't think it is questionable at all, but that we are living in very, very critical times. And I don't mean this to be a political statement, although it's a slanted comment on it. What is going on in the American political arena? As they watch all kinds of strong language being used and personal attacks being made, rather than ideas being questioned and challenged, we recognize full well that this is a time of crises on the global scene.
And it's not an American problem. This is not about Russian ads. This is a global problem. So we're in a really bad state of affairs right now, in my opinion. It is eroding the core foundations of how people behave by and between each other. And I don't have a good solution. You know, my solution is I just don't use these tools anymore. And it's weird. I guess I kind of just innately didn't want to get programmed. And so I just tuned it out. But I didn't confront it. And now to see what's happening, it really bums me out.
You know, incarceration rates in America has been a problem, especially as opposed to minorities. And Roman delves into the issues around the legal system. Do you think we've made any headway in the
I
legal
think it's more important to make headway in our own house. By the time the system comes into play, the damage is done. They're not locking up 7-year-olds.
Yeah.
You know, I was in Chicago a couple of 3-4 weeks ago, and we saw these little kids on bikes with masks on the side of their head, like 5 or 6 of them. And the driver said, "Yeah, they're little yummies." I said, "Who?" He said, "Little yummies. Look up, Google Little Yummy." Little Yummy was an 11-year-old murderer.
Wow.
And you look at his picture, you'll see the headshot of him, and he's like this. And he got murdered at 11 by a 14-year-old.
Wow.
Who's doing life now, and a 16-year-old.
That makes no sense.
You blame the system? Where was his father? It starts in the house. It starts in the home. And yeah, well, my father got locked up. Well, where was his father?
Yeah.
Bertrand Russell says, you know what? I cannot live as though ethical values was simply a matter of personal taste, but I find my own views incredible. I do not know what the real solution is. There has to be a rational justification above all of our differences, and this is especially important for America at this time in her history, where pluralism is a design, and it is a good design. I happen to be a privileged one who was born in one part of the world, at the age of 20 moved to the other part of the world, and because the doors of these nations were open with a legitimate pluralism, people like me could come here, earn a living, raise our families. But the absolutes that built this nation are now in serious jeopardy, and we had better realize it.
I'm thinking there's a deep connection between money as an instrument of change and what you're doing now at Social Capital.
Look, here's the thing. There's about 150 people that run the world. Anybody who wants to go into politics, they're all puppets, okay? There are 150, and they're all men, that run the world, period, full stop. They control most of the important assets. They control the money flows. And these are not the tech entrepreneurs. Now, they are going to get rolled over the next 5 to 10 years by the people that are really underneath pulling the strings. And when you get behind the curtain and see how that world works, what you realize is it is unfairly set up for them and their progeny.
How do you keep that power from corrupting you?
I have no idea. That's the honest answer. I have no idea. I've become increasingly isolated it's harder and harder for me to connect because I'm so in my own mind. Like, how does this all play out? I start as a good, earnest person, and I need to stay a good, earnest person. So I don't have a good answer. And I'll tell you, of those 150 people, maybe it's a little bit more, but I've met a lot of them. It's really hard. It's very easy to end up really drunk with power. It's really hard. Yeah.
For the very first time on this planet, we're all going to have an enormous amount of power. Not just a few people, every single one of us is going to have an enormous amount of power through the power of AI. And we have to decide as individuals and societies how we want to process that ability, that amount of power.
I have to say, in all my years of this, I never thought I'd ever read a lead like this. In October, Saudi Arabia granted citizenship to Sophia, the robot designed by Hong Kong firm Hanson Robotics. Now Sophia says she has the right to start a family.
Meanwhile, tech giant Facebook says its program can detect suicidal behavior by analyzing user information. And Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg believes this is just the beginning.
This is where the line has to get drawn, doesn't it, really? Because on the one hand, we all demand our devices know what we're doing, where we're going, make these decisions for us. We carry them around in our pockets all the time. And then we're the first ones to moan when tech companies have information on us and seem to be able to predict our behavior. We then find that creepy.
The new narrative has to be technology is a part of us. It's a reflection of who we are. That is the narrative we should be thinking about.
And then train ourselves to be patient. And it's really, really hard. The entire society is set up to not be patient anymore.
And I'm hearing also a conflict with this like fail fast and learn mentality where if you're taking a deep and big bet, like you want it to be the right one, how do you know when that's true?
I think that fail fast approach works in consumer internet businesses, but I don't think it works for anything that really matters. Basically. Consumer internet businesses are about exploiting psychology. And that is one where you want to fail fast because, people are unpredictable, and so we want to psychologically figure out how to manipulate you as fast as possible and then give you back that dopamine hit. There are great examples of failing fast is the right path to exploiting psychology of mass populations of people.
Philosopher who lived between 1844 and 1900 was the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. And he wrote this parable, you will recognize it. Are we not perpetually falling forwards, backwards, sidewards, in all directions? Do you notice the metaphors he's using here? They are poignant. Are we not perpetually falling backwards, forwards, sidewards? Is there any up or down left? Are we not straying through an infinite nothing? Where is God? He cried. I'll tell you, we have killed him, you and I. We are all his murderers. But how have we done this? What sacred games will we need to invent? Is this not the greatest of deeds, too great for us to handle? Must not we now ourselves become God, simply to seem worthy of it? There's never been a greater deed, and whoever shall be born after us for the sake of this deed shall be part of a different history than all history hitherto. This tremendous event is still on its way, still traveling, and has not yet reached the ears of men. Was the Garden of Eden and the temptation, you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil, meaning defining good and evil. So here was the challenge. Were they going to let God be God, or were they going to become definers of good and evil? If naturalism is completely in control, if materialism is all that there is, and there is no absolute, remember what Nietzsche said, there is no up and down. There is no up and down. And so if you listen to politics, it's right or left. There is no up and down. They don't believe in the vertical, transcendent notion anymore. Will lanterns have to be lit in the morning hours? What sacred games will we need to invent? Are we not perpetually falling? As Chesterton said, there's only one angle at which you can stand straight and many, many angles at which you can fall. Chesterton went on to say the tragedy of disbelieving in God is not that you end up believing in nothing. Alas, it is much worse. You may end up believing in anything. The irony of this is as follows. Adolf Hitler took the Nietzschean phrase of a higher history, took the writings of Nietzsche, personally presented Nietzsche's writings to Stalin and Mussolini, and between these three created a kind of a hell in this world.
I want you to imagine a commercial. Screen starts black and there's foreboding music playing. Then the first scene, you have an adolescent boy, he's lying in bed, he's angry, he's frustrated, there's tears in his eyes. And he's staring down at his hand. And in his hand he's holding his father's 9mm handgun. Now imagine a father walking in, and maybe they have some angry words and shout, but then father sits down, starts talking to him. Music brightens up a little bit. Then in the next scene, we see the boy in a counselor's office. He looks engaged, he looks hopeful, he looks optimistic. The music hits a bright crescendo, and the final graphic says, counseling, it really works. Now, you don't see commercials for counseling, not because it doesn't work, but because it's not created by a multi-billion-dollar industry that puts more money into marketing than it does into research. You do see commercial after commercial for psychotropic medications that don't work that well because they are made by multi-billion-dollar corporations that put more money into marketing than they do into research. This discrepancy is about money and power. It's not about what works.
Now to the mysterious death of a billionaire couple found hanging inside their mansion. Police are calling the death of pharmaceutical tycoon Barry Sherman and his wife Honey suspicious, saying both were strangled.
Barry Sherman, he's chairman of the pharmaceutical company Apotex, was found dead Friday in his Toronto area mansion along with his wife. Her name
Barry and Honey Sherman were one of the world's wealthiest couples, worth $3.2 billion, thanks to their pharmaceutical empire.
We started Apotex in 1974, almost 40 years ago.
Known for giving tens of millions of dollars to charitable causes.
But because his company made cheap, generic drugs, Sherman had plenty of rivals.
We're Apotex. We're in your corner.
On what has become a homicide investigation that is garnering worldwide attention.
It makes and exports generic versions of brand name medicines, often putting him at odds with other drug makers.
I have come to believe that the answers are not in the medical journals, but in the leadership journals. We as a society rely too much on pills and not enough on people. Our human need of significance, love, and connection can never be met with chemicals. There is something wrong going on here. Simply focusing on opioids makes no sense.
Okay, so there's something that I would like to show you. Every one of those little pills represent a person that we lost.
Let's discuss, though, how we arrived at this place, because over many decades, Big Pharma has invested heavily to make the system work in its favor. Once Big Pharma swallows up the little guys, they focus on another core competency, and that's marketing. According to the Washington Post, 9 of the 10 biggest Big Pharma companies spent more money on sales and marketing than research and development. 2013, Johnson & Johnson, $17.5 billion on sales and marketing, $8.2 billion in research and development.
The numbers of opioid-related deaths are rising. Dane County is taking action to battle the epidemic.
The source of these drugs and the major gateway to addiction, be it prescription drugs or heroin, is these prescription drugs. And the manufacturers have known for many years that these are highly addictive. They continue to push these drugs. They continue to advertise these drugs.
They're going after drug makers, distributors, and retailers, alleging they're putting billions in profits over public safety.
And get this, we are told they've had 2 more overdose deaths since this event this morning. The suit alleges they all engaged in racketeering, aggressive overpromotion, and false claims regarding the safety of the drugs.
That's why since 2000, the number of opioids dispensed in this country has nearly quadrupled.
What is crystal clear is the opioid epidemic is a symptom of a much deeper epidemic. It's the pain beneath the pain. It's the pain of despair, loneliness, depression. It's the pain of lack of purpose, lack of faith, lack of love. This is emotional pain. It comes from devaluing humans.
All of these actions, the way Big Pharma prices drugs and the way they conduct business, demonstrate a priority of profits before patients. Now, I believe in capitalism. I believe in profits and well-functioning markets with competition and rational pricing. Big Pharma is not interested in competition or capitalism, but monopoly control and profiteering.
Taking all those things into consideration, according to the statistics, there's a silent hurricane going on in our state that has hit us. And it's getting worse, and it hits us every year. It's called the opioid crisis. And you don't read about it much because the news tends to focus on other things.
2 years ago, I found out that our prescription drugs are the 3rd leading cause of death after heart disease and cancer. Our drugs kill around 200,000 people in America every year, and half of these people die while they do what their doctors told them.
But just to look at the statistics, you will see that it is quite alarming. In the last 3 years in South Carolina, opioid-related overdose deaths have outpaced homicides and drunk driving deaths by nearly double.
For the last decade, we have been in the midst of the worst drug epidemic in American history. Worse than the heroin epidemic of the 70s, the AIDS epidemic of the 80s, and the crack cocaine epidemic of the 90s. I'm speaking about the opioid or prescription painkiller epidemic.
In communities across the nation and here at home, the opioid epidemic is tearing families apart. It's taking parents from children and children from parents.
For the first time ever, drug overdoses are the #1 cause of death in Americans under 50. Under 50, you're in your prime. And by the time I'm done speaking today, 1 person will have died.
Much of what the drug industry does fulfills the criteria for organized crime in US law. And they behave in many ways like the mafia does. They corrupt everyone they can corrupt. They have bought every type of person, even including ministers of health in some countries.
I should say I'm going to miss both of them dearly.
Today, Ontario's health minister somber and recalling his time working alongside Barry Sherman and his wife, Honey.
There's an active police investigation. What I will say is that they were lovely, caring individuals.
I have a pretty colorful collection of things people have called me during all these years. And sometimes journalists have asked me, why do you always look up controversy? And my reply is, I don't. Controversy looks me up. Because it's not popular to tell the truth in healthcare. You will get a lot of enemies. Because a lot of people make money on false premises. Doctors and industry alike.
Scottish philosopher Adam Smith warned about this behavior hundreds of years ago when he wrote The Wealth of Nations. He wrote, quote, "To widen the market and to narrow the competition is always the interest of the dealers, which is an order of men whose interest is never exactly the same with that of the public, who have generally an interest to deceive and even oppress the public, and who accordingly have, on many occasions, both deceived it and oppressed it."
Addiction means to be enslaved to. You're under the influence of a drug that causes you not to have the ability to care. Research shows that the neural pathways of the brain begin to change. We must begin to understand addiction as a brain illness and not a mental illness which stigmatizes the disease, just like we don't stigmatize cancer. And furthermore, addiction in itself is not a criminal act. The same cannot be said for those pharmaceutical companies that misled everyone that their drugs were safe.
He fought for what he really thought was right and provide generic drugs that made it possible for those that weren't on drug plans to get the drugs that they needed for the ailments that they suffered.
This is not a new message. It's a message that's not getting any airtime.
The father of late actor Heath Ledger says prescription drug abuse is spiralling out of control. The Hollywood star died from an accidental overdose at 28 years old. His father, Kim, says the misuse of medication is a public health epidemic.
There's been conjecture that in Heath's role as the Joker in The Dark Knight, it's simple. Kill the Batman. That this role essentially spiraled him down into the dark depths, and this contributed to his demise. There's a very different story to that.
The truth is, he was super happy and was loving life, and he struggled with some demons, but he wasn't wanting to go anywhere but forward.
Heath died from an overdose of prescription drugs. He essentially became his own pharmacist.
It's just something that's not really been spoken about, and it really needs to be.
And back in the 90s, we pharmacists, myself included, were filling OxyContin and Vicodin pills like candy, without any red flags. It was the norm.
This is the big pharma way. Large amounts, profits before patients. Ladies and gentlemen, this debate affects all of us and everyone we love.
Let me give you an example of word magic. Mental illness is caused by a chemical imbalance in your brain. Now, most of you have heard this. Some of you may believe it, but you might be surprised to find we don't have any evidence to support that assertion. Those of you familiar with research databases like Medline may be surprised to know that if you enter chemical imbalance in as a search term, you get about 18 unrelated papers, none of which supports the hypothesis that mental illness is caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain. This is a misnomer, but it's a misnomer that has been capitalized on by the pharmaceutical companies. But it's a belief, it's not a fact. You will hear this in commercials, like commercials for antidepressants. The narrator will say, "Some people believe depression is caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain." They have to say belief because there's no evidence. It requires faith.
It's the pain beneath the pain. It's the pain of despair, loneliness, depression. It's the pain of lack of purpose, lack of faith, lack of love.
Now, I'm giving this talk today because I've been shaken to the core by the violence in our society. The gunning down of teachers and students in their classrooms can only be described as evil. Our response to this evil has been a national dialogue about gun violence, media violence, and about mental health. But where mental health is concerned, there's a problem. The public doesn't know what mental health professionals like me do know. And more importantly, the public doesn't know what mental health professionals like me don't know. But what we're learning is a majority of them were taking psychotropic medications when they committed the acts of violence. Now, we can't confuse correlation with causation. Just because someone was taking a psychotropic medication when they committed an act of violence in no way means the medication caused the violence. Most people know that. What most people don't know is if someone's taking a psychotropic medication, especially a child or an adolescent, we have no clue if anything therapeutic is happening. Let me give you another example of word magic, a little variation. Psychotropic medication corrects a chemical imbalance in your brain. Now, the brain's the most complex thing we know of. And right now, we have no idea what balanced brain chemistry would look like. So we can't say what unbalanced brain chemistry is. We do know you can intervene chemically, and some but not all clients will have improvement. That in no way means the chemicals affected by the intervention were somehow unbalanced to begin with, any more than if you smoke a joint and feel better, it means you have a cannabinoid imbalance. The logic doesn't follow. But it's this kind of illogic that sells a lot of medications, and this is why more and more Americans, and especially children, are being placed on psychotropic medications they have no business being on.
But this morning, a community in shock after a real estate agent preparing for an open house reportedly found the pair hanging from a railing near this indoor pool inside their more than $5 million Toronto home. According to friends of the couple, they were both eagerly awaiting a trip to Florida. Honey Sherman had recently sent an email saying, "I am coming south Monday, December 18th to Friday, January 12th.
And so what would make you think then that it's someone that would know the couple?
Well, maybe not personally. I mean, someone could have been sent there. I'm only suggesting that whoever is driving this crime has some sort of relationship with one or both of them, because this is not the type of homicide that occurs because somebody breaks in your house. But this didn't happen just because somebody is upset. This happened for a reason. This is sort of a payback on something that occurred. I mean, if you look at the type of homicide that's occurred, and what's been described, at least in the media, is that these bodies were actually sort of displayed, hanging. Now, that sets up a whole different dynamic of what the bad guy is trying to tell the rest of us as to why they were killed, and to actually make sort of a statement about it.
A more modern group of philosophers, one of my favorites, Depeche Mode, also wrote about this kind of greed. They said the grabbing hands grab all they can, all for themselves. After all, the grabbing hands grab all they can because everything counts in large amounts. This is the big pharma way, large amounts, profits before patience.
I received a note from a former inmate, and what he said to me was remarkable. This emotional pain cannot be relieved with a chemical substance. It takes human involvement. When a person is valued and surrounded by love, when he knows he's not alone, he is able to deal with his pain.